In this week's Torah reading, we learn about a skin and garment affliction that only happened in ancient times. Shalom, my friends. This is the Kiva Gersh with Israel in 5, where we give you everything Israel in 5 minutes. Please like and subscribe. And if you have any questions or want to keep the conversation going, please do so below in the comments. This week's Torah portion, Tazria, it's in the book of Leviticus, where we're learning so much about the tabernacle and the sacrifices that took place in the tabernacle and all the ins and outs and the details. And in this week's Torah portion, we learn about something very, very different that we haven't learned about before. Basically, these skin afflictions that people in the ancient days would have. Now, today, if someone had this kind of skin affliction, they go to the doctor, they get a prescription, they get a cream, it would go away and they'd move on with their lives. But back then, it was a very, very different kind of thing. This week's Torah reading goes into great detail about the size, the color, the appearance of these skin afflictions, where in the body these afflictions are happening. And they're looked at from the lens of the Torah more as spiritual afflictions, not so much physical afflictions. Next week, we'll learn about the purification process of dealing with these afflictions, and we'll talk more about that then. But in this week's Torah portion, we learn about these afflictions, these blemishes, these things that would appear on people's skin, and then later on in the Torah reading, on people's garments as well, clothing of all different kinds. And again, it goes into great detail about the size and the color and the appearance of these different blemishes or afflictions. But the main teaching that we can get, right, because it seems very strange and mysterious, like, what is it talking about? Like, again, if this happened today, we wouldn't talk about it at great length. You go to the doctor, based on his or her medical knowledge, would tell you what it was, what to do, what to take, what cream to use, and you go on with your life. But back then, things were very different. These weren't just physical blemishes. They weren't just physical afflictions. These were manifestations physically of a spiritual condition, of something on the inside. And the way that the Torah looks at it is that there's something off in the person's life, but they're not aware of it. They're not sensitive enough to it. Therefore, God had to bring upon this affliction, this blemish on their skin, so they should see it and hopefully think, oh wow, I'm having this physical thing happening to me, but it's probably because of something inside that is off. Let me look inside as well. I have to deal with this physically outside now that it's here. I do have to deal with it, but it's more of a spiritual kind of thing that I need to deal with on the inside. And again, we'll learn more about this next week as well, and the purification process, and another piece of this kind of world of blemishes and afflictions that the Torah talks about. But for now, we'll talk about this idea that whatever happens in the physical world really is a representation, a reflection, a manifestation even of something going on deeper in the spiritual, personal, emotional realm. And this is a very, very strong teaching that we see in the Torah and at different places of the Torah, that there's nothing random. There's nothing that just happens because. Anything that happens in this world is happening for a reason. If we believe that everything comes from God, right, then that everything comes from God, right? Even skin blemishes. And there must be a reason why that's happening. While there could be just a physical reason, maybe there's something you touched, a plant, or you got a rash, or whatever it might be, there's always still this spiritual component. And now in our modern day times, with science like really leading the way in terms of our understanding of the world, and I love science. Science is a great thing, right? We learn so much from it. It has taken away a little bit of the mystery of the world. But even more importantly than that, it's taken away the understanding and the idea and the belief in that there is a spiritual kind of component to whatever happens physically in the world. A lot of people have kind of divorced these two things and said, oh, there's only there's only a physical reason happening behind physical things. But when we go back thousands of years ago to the original words of the Torah says something different. It says that there's physical and spiritual reasons behind everything happening in the physical realm. Right, and so we see this very, very clearly in this week's Torah reading, right, with these blemishes, these afflictions of the skin, of the body, and also of somebody's clothing. That they're basically all messages, right? God's trying to speak to us, so to speak, through what happens to us in our lives and in our world and with our stuff, whether it's our body, which is the closest we can get, right, or the clothing that we're wearing. That these are signs and messages coming from God to say, hey, pause. Stop for a moment, check in with yourself. What's going on? What's off? What's not working? Let's do some fixing here. Let's do some realigning and so that we can move forward in a better way. And this is a very, very powerful teaching that's coming to us through this week's Torah portion in a very, very kind of mysterious way. It's not like fully, spoken out by the words of the Torah, but it's a hidden message in the words of this week's Torah portion, right, which is something often that the Torah does. So this is something that we can take from a very, very technical, kind of mysterious Torah reading and extract this really beautiful and potentially helpful teaching for our everyday lives.